I'll test this real quick.
Yeah.
Raw emotion spills out through a small hearing room at the Liquor Control Committee.
Okay, good.
Boy, I've never seen this before. Love this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, Melissa's returned. And Melissa, Ben Thompson is going to record the session.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
I pressed, this is the first time I've ever attempted to record a Zoom session. I pressed record and it says that it's currently recording.
Right.
I don't know if anybody has any insight as to how I might, my familiarity with files is saving them and then maneuvering them around. I'm not entirely sure where this is recording to.
Probably the cloud, and then it will probably come back to you.
Okay. Thank you very
much. If it doesn't come back to you, it'll go back to Jose.
Okay. Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry for my inexperience.
No.
Absolutely fine.
Yeah. So Jennifer's here, Melissa.
Yes, I'm here, and I'll get on video here in a minute. I just reached out to Bryan and was trying to walk him through finding that, because I couldn't find the breakout room either.
Okay.
So he was still in that general session portion.
Okay, good.
And I feel like this is my first time using Zoom.
It differs every time, it seems.
I'm pretty proud of myself just for getting background up there.
Okay.
As soon as we get Bryan in here, I hope he doesn't have any problems. I feel kind of bad. I felt like it was I was reaching out to Mary just back and forth this morning. I was really confused.
Yeah, it's fine. I had a little difficulty. I've been working on it since last night, trying to make sure I had everything. So it's fine. I'm always here for help.
Yeah, and then I was getting all these codes coming my way
and emails. I think I have a whole folder full of emails. For the
I know.
There he is. Hello, Mr. Brewer.
I made it.
No kidding. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. I was really worried. What am I going to do here?
Oh, we were worried, Bryan.
Yes. Well, when they go through all the presentations, Jennifer, will you be controlling the slides?
I believe Kevin has control of the slides.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you.
Just raise your hand like that and I'll move to the next slide.
Just raise my hand and move to the next one. Okay.
Yep, I'll move to the next one.
All right. Am I the only one that has trouble getting organized here?
No.
I think we've all been challenged today.
Yes, definitely.
You're putting us to the test. No, Bryan, I was like scrambling. And then when I figured it out, I was going to try to help you. And I'm like, I don't even know how I got there. So I was like, Mary, can you walk him through?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I can't do it twice.
Yeah, I do it. Yeah, I was thinking, where's Kevin at?
Oh, I know. And then I was calling Kevin and no answer. And then Kevin had me sweating there.
I'm up in the Black Hills this week on vacation, and I left my phone at our Airbnb this morning. So I have my son's phone, but I don't have mine on me.
He's probably thinking, who keeps calling?
Yeah.
Kevin, you're coming through crystal clear.
Good.
Well, it's 12:30. Do we want to start?
We can.
Sure.
We can go ahead. Or we could, I don't know, do we want to wait a couple minutes or just go ahead and get started?
I'm ready whenever you all are.
Okay, Kevin, we'll go ahead and start with you. If you could please do the land acknowledgement.
Sure. Good morning. Haumadakiapi. Chanwashti anapi chuza pilo, tachankucheska macha pilo, malakota. At this time, I would like to read the land acknowledgement for our presentation today. We humbly acknowledge that the land on which we live and work and gather today, the land that is called the United States, is the homeland of hundreds of indigenous nations. Many indigenous peoples call this land Turtle Island. While indigenous peoples were forced to give up large parts of their territories or move far away from them, they are still here on Turtle Island and still exist as nations. We recognize the irreducible and ongoing relationship that indigenous peoples have with their traditional territories. Honoring a territory becomes meaningful when it is the basis for building relationships with indigenous peoples and the land. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Elizabeth, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Oh, I didn't know if you guys had some opening comments before we get started.
Yes, I'm going to go ahead and open it. And hello and welcome to our 21st annual SCLC conference. Panel of Every Reservation Has Its Whiteclay. Lessons learned while fighting to end predatory beer sales in one Nebraska border town. My name is Melissa Rosenfelt. I am an MPA student and teacher's assistant at the University of Central Oklahoma, a member of the Seminole Nation of Oklahoma, and member of the Ocheesee Band and Deer Clan. As your moderator for this session, it is an honor to introduce our esteemed presenters, Jennifer LaMere, Bryan Brewer, and Kevin Abourezk. We are also joined by Dr. Elizabeth Overman from the University of Central Oklahoma, who has asked that we honor John Maish, Associate Professor from UCO, who recently passed March of this year. Professor Maish played a crucial role in the development of this examination of Whiteclay. He used his legal and research expertise of alcoholic beverage law and policy and worked alongside Winnebago activist Frank LaMere to examine and address the harm of targeted beer sales surrounding indigenous reservations. Professor Maish produced and directed the documentary Sober Indian, Dangerous Indian, a film chronicling the lives of 4 Oglala men struggling with addiction on the streets of Whiteclay, Nebraska. We gather today in celebration of Professor Maish and Mr. LaMere's work and to say Mado for their passion and their teachings. Now I would like to turn the floor over to our esteemed panel so they can introduce themselves and begin their presentation. Mado.
Well, thank you for those kind words. Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer LaMere. I am a member of the Winnebago Tribe of Nebraska. I currently serve as a health system administrator, and I've worked very closely with a number of tribes in tribal health and urban programs. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Kevin and Bryan if they want to introduce themselves as well.
Good afternoon. My name is Kevin Abourezk, and I serve as managing editor for Indians.com. I am a citizen of the Rosebud Sioux tribe and live in Lincoln, Nebraska, although today I'm actually reaching out to you from the Black Hills of South Dakota. And with that, I'll pass it along to Bryan Brewer. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. Can you hear me? Okay. My name is Bryan Brewer. I am from Pine Ridge, South Dakota. I live 2 miles from Whiteclay, Nebraska. While John was making his documentary, I was the president of the Oglala Sioux tribe.
Yeah.
I am a retired educator, and I still reside on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have our slides pulled up? Thank you. So we are honored to be with you today, and we look forward to sharing this valuable and powerful history about the town of Whiteclay. We hope that you are touched and deeply moved and encouraged to make yourselves uncomfortable. Our presentation is titled, "Every Reservation Has Its Whiteclay." This line was actually a quote that my father, Frank LaMere, stated in the documentary that Mr. Maish produced, Sober Indian, Dangerous Indian. You will soon learn why this statement is powerful and significant. Next slide. The town of Pine Ridge is located in the lower southwest corner of South Dakota. Pine Ridge falls within the reservation boundaries of the Oglala Sioux tribe. The reservation has a population of 30,000 people, and it is a dry reservation. For those of you that don't know what a dry reservation is, the sale and possession of alcohol is illegal on the reservation. Next slide. Whiteclay, Nebraska sits straight south of Pine Ridge. You can literally see these two towns in the distance from each other. In 2016, Whiteclay had a population of 12 people, yet managed to sustain 4 beer stores. Next slide. So as you can see on the slide, the distance is very minimal between the two border towns, Pine Ridge being on the reservation in South Dakota and Whiteclay right on the border of Nebraska. Right. As I stated, the town of Whiteclay sustained 4 beer stores, and amongst these 4 beer stores, they sold 11,000 cans of beer per day, every single day. This equates to an unfathomable amount of 3.5 million cans of beer per year. Next slide. In June of 1999, there were 2 Lakota men, Wilson Black Elk and Ronald Hardheart. They were found murdered and located between the town of Whiteclay and Pine Ridge. Local tribal leaders and activists, Russell Means of the American Indian Movement, had had enough, and they staged a march from Pine Ridge to Whiteclay to protest these murders and other unanswered assaults that inundated the Whiteclay area. Next slide. On this particular day, my father being a lifelong citizen of Nebraska and fully aware of the situation arising, he would join the march as a supporter and an ally to the Lakota people. These 2 influential Native activists would cross the state line from South Dakota into Nebraska, where Nebraska State Police waited and swiftly arrested a dozen or so people. July 3rd of 1999 would begin my father's plight and political and legal battle to change the landscape of Whiteclay, a battle that would last nearly 2 decades. Next slide. Since 1999, my father worked tirelessly and endlessly to raise awareness of the situation and, frankly, the modern-day genocide that was occurring in Whiteclay. He would speak of Whiteclay and the effects that alcohol had on Native people to anyone and everyone that would listen. He was included in a handful of documentaries that followed the legal and political hurdles that he and others endured in their battle to change things. One in particular, Sober Indian, Dangerous Indian, would chronicle the lives of 4 Lakota men and their personal struggle with addiction, as well as the impact that the beer stores of Whiteclay had on each individual. Next slide. Mr. John Mace developed, filmed, and directed Sober Indian, Dangerous Indian. John Mace was the former liquor prosecutor for the state of Nebraska and was also well aware of the situation in Nebraska. Together, LaMere and Mace utilized the documentary as a tool to raise awareness and alleviate the issue. They continually demanded that the beer stores must close. Next slide. This slide includes the extent that the documentary was shared at various venues and events. They toured, universities, different conferences, theaters across the country. Every showing was followed up by a question and answer, an up close and personal perspective from both LaMere and Mace. And there was just a lot of information sharing. You could see there was quite a number of events. Anywhere that they were invited to go, they certainly accommodated. Next slide. So on April 19th of 2017, the Nebraska Liquor Control Commission finally voted to close down the beer stores in Whiteclay, Nebraska. This day would change the fabric and being of Whiteclay forever and have a lasting effect on the Lakota people. However, as we all know, healing after decades of historical trauma will not take place overnight. Next slide. The beer stores of Whiteclay did not close down due to Frank LaMere nor John Mace, although I'd like to believe that these two men played a significant role. But the closure really took a team of folks consisting of Native leaders, activists, allies, public health advocates, university staff, and students that really had the compassion and empathy to step forward and speak up about the atrocities that were occurring. My father had always said and shared with me that all the pieces finally came together, and we did it. We shut the damn thing down. I'll turn it over to Bryan.
Thank you. How are Whiteclay activists challenging assumptions and shifting paradigms to close Whiteclay beer stores? We had many people that were involved in this. I was on the grassroots level where John and Frank were in Nebraska, making awareness of Whiteclay. And it was very difficult for us being on a grassroots level here on Pine Ridge because we did not know what all was happening in Nebraska. I would get caught up on things when I would speak to Frank and John, especially when Frank would come to the Pine Ridge Reservation. Next. From 1999 to 2014, Whiteclay activists assumed Nebraska leaders would see Whiteclay as a moral issue. Nebraska was undermining the tribe's ban on alcohol by licensing the 4 stores on the Pine Ridge border. This was very difficult because Nebraska looked the other way. Most of the citizens of Nebraska did not know where Whiteclay, Nebraska was. They didn't know what was going on, the problems that our Lakota people were facing. And that was one of the big problems, is that Nebraska would not recognize what was happening. Next. Most Nebraska leaders rejected this moral argument, reminding activists that beer was unlawful in Nebraska and assuming that drinking in Whiteclay was a matter of personal choice. And this is something they always said, but I don't believe it was a personal choice because our people were born into this. They never had a choice. Yeah. They were born into the alcoholism, but they never had a choice. And that is the way they were brought up. So it was very difficult for us living here to hear that it was a personal choice when it was not. Next. In 2015, Whiteclay activists retooled their moral arguments and added 2 additional issues. Next. The moral issue was Nora pediatric nurse, adopted parents, and fetal alcohol syndrome disorder clinician became a leading voice in the Whiteclay movement. This was a whole different thing that was brought up, how it was affecting our children off the reservation and on the reservation, and especially on the reservation where our school systems had all these fetal alcohol syndrome students. Next. I have a blur here. Public health experts estimated that 1 out of 4 Pine Ridge infants is born with FASD. Next. Next. Nora's adopted daughter, Ariana, whose biological mother, breached in Whiteclay, was born with FASD. Her struggles changed the entire Whiteclay narrative. And this is what, this became a very personal issue for the people that were supporting us and those people that were being aware of what was happening. Next. Next.
We lost Bryan there. I can, oh, no, there he is. Okay.
Okay, I'm back again.
Okay.
I don't know what happened. The healthcare of the cost of the hospitalization, and this is just for Ariana, this is $3,300,000. And this is just for one child. We have so many children on a reservation that are also, we have these costs for all of our children. And it's overwhelming for our tribe, for our Indian Health Service. Of how do we meet the needs of all the children that are affected with this? Next. Suddenly, Whiteclay wasn't about personal choices. It was about protecting infants that would be born in Pine Ridge. You know, we have all of our children with FAS, but we're not talking about the children who were traumatized because of the alcohol being brought into their homes. We have our children that were abused physically, mentally, sexually abused. And this is something that I really believe that we really need to look at the healing for our children that is a direct result of the alcohol on the reservation. Next. Fiscal issue. From 1999 to 2014, Whiteclay activists assumed that Nebraska kept Whiteclay beer stores open because of the excise and sale tax generated by the 4 stores. And this was, it all came down to money, money that Nebraska was getting, the county was getting, and what the owners of the beer liquor stores were receiving. They made so much money on the Lakota people. Next. Beginning in 2015, Whiteclay activists started challenging that assumption, including that Whiteclay-related incarceration and hospitalization expenses meant Whiteclay was actually costing Nebraska taxpayers. And it did. This cost Nebraska a lot of money, but it also cost our reservation a lot of money. Every day we had our ambulances going into Whiteclay, getting people who were injured, who were hurt, but everyone suffered because of this, not only Nebraska, but the finances of the reservation also. Next. Thanks to a Freedom of Information Act, FOIA request, Whiteclay activists discovered that Sheridan County officials were voicing private concerns about the law enforcement costs attributed to Whiteclay. This was a turning point, I believe, because Nebraska was actually, the county was actually seeing what it was costing them. And it was costing a lot of money with the sheriff's department in Whiteclay so much. Next. The invisible Whiteclay. You know, you talk about the money that was brought in, the money that was spent, $631,000 of Sheridan County. It cost the Sheridan County law enforcement, $430,000. Highway law enforcement cost was $201,000. I think this was really something when the Nebraska people actually saw what it cost. The sad part is that even with all these high costs, the Sheridan County still supported the sales of alcohol. Next. Legal issue. From 1999 to 2014, Whiteclay activists assumed that Nebraska legislature could pass legislation banning beer sales in Whiteclay. You know, I went to Lincoln, Nebraska, and I set up a meeting with the governor of Nebraska to talk about Whiteclay. And it got out that I was going to talk to him about Whiteclay in the papers, and he refused to meet with me. I went to his office, and after he attacked me and I had to leave, he did not want anything to do with Whiteclay at all. Next. In 2015, Whiteclay activists challenged that assumption, recognizing that targeted administrative action was the only feasible route to closing Whiteclay beer stores. Next. Existing Nebraska statutes prohibited the Nebraska Liquor Commission from issuing a beer license in place that lacked adequate law enforcement. This was something that was really helped us, is that they could not give the licenses if there was not enough law enforcement. Next. Whiteclay activists challenged the assumption that 53-132 only applied to new licenses, asserting that material change in circumstances would allow the Nebraska Liquor Control Commission to force current stores to reapply for new licenses. This was a big issue because they thought they were getting them automatically every year. And when they had to apply every year, it changed everything. Next. Dispatch logs secured through FOIA revealed the nature, frequency, and response times to 911 calls made to the Sheridan County Sheriff's Office located 21 miles away. This was always an issue because of the distance from Whiteclay to Rushville, Nebraska, where the sheriffs were. So many bad things happened where the sheriffs could not get there in time. But there were so many calls, and I know they were overwhelmed. Next. These dispatch logs confirmed reports that a woman later identified as Sherry Woundedfoot was found unresponsive behind a building in Whiteclay on August 5th, 2016. Sherry was not the only Lakota that was found dead in Whiteclay. We had numerous people that were found dead, died of exposure, died of alcohol poisoning right there. But it doesn't talk about the number of people that were taken to our Pine Ridge Hospital that also died because of Whiteclay. They were taken there by ambulance. Our people took them. Next. On April 6, 2017, following decades of predatory beer sales, the Nebraska Liquor Control Commission finally conducted a 10-hour administrative hearing to decide whether to issue Whiteclay 4 beer licenses. Next.
Brian, I might pick it up from here if that's...
Yes.
All right, thank you. Appreciate that. Nebraska Liquor Control Commission hearing included testimony from Tatewi Means, the Oglala Sioux Tribe's Attorney General, and Whiteclay missionary Marcia Bonfleur, who testified in multiple encounters with Lakota women who had been sexually assaulted in Whiteclay. By challenging assumptions and shifting paradigms, Whiteclay activists witnessed the Nebraska Supreme Court affirm the NLCC's beer store closures on September 29th, 2017. I'd like to share just a clip here from a video describing this very historic moment. Oh, actually, let me make sure. All right, that should be good.
Raw emotion spills out through a small hearing room at the Liquor Control Commission.
It is a great day. I feel very good.
A teary-eyed Frank LaMere rejoices after fighting for this decision for generations.
Sometimes it just takes us so long, but we get there.
It's like you being able to tell somebody something for 20 years and they never listened to you. And then all of a sudden, for that 1 second, they listen to you. And all of that pent-up emotion you have comes out.
We came together as neighbors. We came together and took on a tough issue, and after 2 decades, we were able to get it done.
And it's not relief, but it's pent-up emotion. And all of those things, anger, frustration, all of them come out. Things that you carry, all that is a burden. And you've been going, and all of a sudden you get to throw it off.
The 4 liquor stores in the unincorporated town will no longer have liquor licenses. Monday morning, beer was loaded, case after case, onto trucks and taken away.
To see beer actually being loaded onto the trucks instead of off is, you know, like I said, it's just surreal.
There's potential to redevelop the town and start fresh.
There's 4 properties right there in Whiteclay that can become something that will honor the Lakota Nation.
Nebraska's Attorney General Doug Peters.
Okay. Let's kind of move back to the all right. So update. The dire warnings of border town violence and alcohol-related traffic fatalities increasing in Whiteclay's beer stores, if Whiteclay's beer stores closed, never came to pass. And this was something that a lot of people had talked about, that they feared would happen, that by closing down the beer stores, essentially in Whiteclay, you'd create another Whiteclay just further down the road. And that never happened, you know, because there's law enforcement. There's law enforcement in these other communities that sell beer near the reservation, unlike Whiteclay, where there is no law enforcement. Here we see Sheridan County felony case filings going down after 2017, after the beer stores were closed. Sheridan County is the most adjacent county in Nebraska. Again, Sheridan County alcohol-related traffic accidents down from 2017, alcohol-related traffic fatalities down from 2017. Whiteclay sales tax revenue, and this was sort of counterintuitive, right? You would think that by shutting down the beer stores that you'd see a decrease in sales tax revenue, when in fact what happened was there was an increase in sales tax revenue following the closure of those stores, in large part because consumers felt safe once again to go back to Whiteclay, because there's a lot of other things there happening in Whiteclay. There are restaurants and grocery stores, and now there's even a makerspace where people can go and create their own Native American arts and crafts there. It's a really cool place as well. And there's a Dollar General now too, so people can go and do all those kinds of things.
So in June of 2019, my father, Frank LaMere, had passed away in Nebraska. His continual message to all that knew him remained, nothing changes until someone is made to feel uncomfortable. In this messaging, he reiterates the importance of standing on the side of morality. He often stated that we know it's legal to sell alcohol, but is it right? Next slide. He continued to push the state of Nebraska and ask uncomfortable questions, many of which revolved around unsolved murders in the area. He often referred to himself as a voice for the voiceless. Next slide. My father was a lifelong activist who spent decades combating the effects of substance abuse and addiction among our Native people. He continued to urge Nebraska to stop the flow of alcohol onto the Pine Ridge Reservation. Next slide. LaMere understood the historical plight of the Lakota people and expressed the importance of one day returning Whiteclay region to the Lakota people. This region had once belonged to the tribe and was ultimately ceded away as much as was their land. Kevin?
On December 22nd, 2021, a Whiteclay activist transferred 48 acres of Whiteclay property to an Oglala-led nonprofit corporation. Thunder Valley Community Development Corporation has announced tentative plans to build transitional housing and permanent supportive housing on the site in Whiteclay. According to the Whiteclay activist, transforming Whiteclay into a place of healing is the best insurance policy against the beer stores ever returning. You can imagine, the kind of moral argument one would have to make in order to try to justify reestablishing these beer stores in a place where hopefully, here in the future, in the near future, we'll have treatment centers and we'll have transitional housing for Native American men and women leaving prison or leaving treatment, where they can go and spend time before they have to go back to their communities, essentially. What kind of justification would somebody have to make in order to say that this place needs a beer store, What predatory practice near a tribal reservation by you needs to be addressed? As Frank LaMere once said, every reservation has its Whiteclay. And I would add that, there are these kinds of border towns where these beer stores are set up on the edges of reservations that are dry, like Pine Ridge. And even Pine Ridge itself has other border towns like Ulrichs and Martin, and at one time even up in the Badlands there in a little town called Interior, there was a number of beer stores today. But Winnebago, has a border town called Homer, Nebraska. There's a pretty rugged bar there called the Bonanza. And, all around the Navajo reservation, you'll find these kinds of predatory border towns as well. It's very common. There's a quote from Martin Luther King Jr., "Those who love peace must learn to organize as effectively as those who love war." And now we'll open up for questions or comments.
I'd like to start out with a question. I'd like to know from the perspective of the three of you, what needs to happen next? What does the federal government need to do? Or what can the federal government do to support the efforts at Whiteclay and the needs of other reservations to get rid of these predatory practices that are so damaging?
I'll speak. The Bureau of Indian Affairs has a trust responsibility to watch us, to make sure that we are safe. And so far, the Bureau of Indian Affairs have never stepped in. Our tribe has, because of the politics, they have not stepped in either. So this is something that I really believe the Lakota people, we have to do it ourselves and working with the people in Nebraska. Thank you.
Okay, so Bryan, you're calling for local self-determination.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that?
Whiteclay was once a part of what was called a buffer zone. This was an area, I think it was like 50 miles, maybe even around the reservation, that a president had once established as an area that would be alcohol free. But that was rescinded, that order, that executive order. And then Whiteclay was then, of course, given back to private land. Now, I'm not even necessarily arguing that. I don't know that something like that would work anymore. I think it's more up to states, I guess, like what happened in Nebraska, where, we had to take this had to be taken to the Nebraska Liquor Control Commission in order to be shut down. So often these border towns lack this kind of law enforcement, and they tend to be fairly like Wild West towns. And I don't think it's very difficult to make this argument that these communities really can't support the kind of beer sales that they're generating. So I think that argument should be taken to other state liquor control commissions as well.
Okay. Jennifer?
No, I just kind of echo Brian and Kevin's comments. I think it's more on state level. I'm not really sure what the federal government could do aside from BIA, but with this situation with Whiteclay being on, the Nebraska side, it really made it difficult. And like Brian said, it took 2 decades, and had, Frank LaMere, John Mace, Dennis Carlson, Brian Brewer, continue to battle, we would still have Whiteclay. Unfortunately, the government, failed. It took folks and activists to step in and really make the change.
Okay, people coming forward and staying forward, being willing to engage over an incredibly long period of time. I don't think we have any questions in the chat.
I have a question.
Oh, great. Go ahead, Heather.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. I have a question about the FOIA, because sometimes, while people have to comply, right? Sometimes there are more obstacles than others. Did you all face any obstacles in pursuing FOIA?
Unfortunately, unless Kevin or Brian can correct me here, John Mace was really behind all the legalities and everything that went on with the Whiteclay battle. I wouldn't know the details of the FOIA request. Brian, do you?
You know what? I couldn't hear the question. Could that be repeated?
Oh, yes. I wondered if you ran into any obstacles in pursuing FOIA. While everyone has to comply with FOIA when you put the request forward, some communities may have greater obstacles in getting that information.
John was very persistent, and so was Frank in getting this information from us. But I know they had a very difficult time getting this. So it was difficult.
Thanks.
Yeah, because go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say just another comment. I know that John also pursued. I talked about the arrest in 1999, and John had asked about the records, the police records, and he really had a difficult time getting the records. And eventually he was able to get the film, but it took a lot for him. I mean, I think he had to go through a lot of back doors to get that information. Of course, there were no police records, and they were archived, and no, we don't have them. But it took a number of years for him to get the police records from that day.
I have a question or comment if it's appropriate.
Sure.
and a good time. My name is Ben, and I'm a graduate student at USF participating in the Masters in Nonprofit Administration. And I really found each of your contributions to be extremely powerful. I attended law school and practiced law for about 15 years and didn't find it very satisfying. But I took copious notes during your presentation, and I intend to run, not walk, to find a copy of Sober Indian, Dangerous Indian. Do you guys, first of all, thank you guys so much. I found your presentation really powerful. I also really liked that the activists challenged people's assumptions and worked on shifting people's paradigms.
Yeah.
Do you guys recommend, in addition to Sober Indian, Dangerous Indian, perhaps any other resources that you guys find meaningful or would assist me in becoming a better advocate for human rights in general?
You know, I will just put this comment out there, and I'm, extremely biased because, of course, my father, and I love John Mache. I thought the world of John Mache, but Sober Indian, Dangerous Indian is just an excellent documentary. It really, is at the grassroots. You see what each individual is going through. You just connect with those 4 individuals, and it's funny, but it's sad. It's very sad, but it will show you Indian humor and how we deal with things and how we deal with trauma. It's a great start. It's a really good start.
Thank you so much.
I have to agree with Jennifer on that. The documentary is so powerful.
Well, like I said, I intend to not walk but run to find a copy of it. And I really find that your experience could serve as a model for other communities trying to lead a healthy lifestyle. So thank you all very much.
Well, thank you for your insights and your comments, Ben. I have used Sober Indian, Dangerous Indian in my classes. And like Bryan said, it is incredibly powerful. And I want to comment on the fact that in the process of getting the ruling that closed those liquor stores, the movement was able to change perspectives. Sometimes movements aren't able to do that, and they can't be strategic. And the people sort of trying to get things done actually realized that it wasn't for the sake of the movement, it was actually to get those stores closed. And they managed to do that, which then opened up all kinds of other opportunities. And we see, as Kevin pointed out, that Whiteclay is flourishing. And I think part of this is because liquor industry has been notorious about not actually reporting their true earnings and not paying their taxes. And now in Whiteclay, we have people who are actually paying taxes, so they're contributing to the common good.
Yes.
I mean,
Ms. Overman. Oh, I'm sorry. Before we close, we want to say a few words about John, if that's okay.
Oh, that would be much appreciated.
Bryan?
I would, when I have to speak for our Lakota people, that Whiteclay would have never been closed if it wasn't for John and working with Frank. As president, we would walk into Whiteclay 2 or 3 nights a week and close down Whiteclay. We would actually close it down. And we would close it down for an hour or 2 before the sheriff's department could get there. And one night we were walking in there, and this guy was walking around with a camera. And I was wondering, who is this guy? Who's this guy who's taking pictures of us, And when John, I got to meet him afterwards, he told me who he was and what he was doing. And that was the beginning of the end of Whiteclay. When the Lakota, we would protest. No one paid any attention to us. We were hoping that people were seeing what we were doing, but the people in Nebraska really weren't. It was very, very difficult. But when Frank teamed up with John, everything started to happen. I mean, it was amazing how things start moving. The people in Nebraska became aware of what was happening to our Lakota people. And I just want to say that without John, Whiteclay would still be open today. And without, Frank LaMere, it would have still been open. These two individuals who actually, they did everything and made this possible. And the Lakota people cannot thank them enough. Whiteclay was a terrible place. It was a terrible place. The closing of Whiteclay did not stop our alcoholism on the reservation. We're still dealing with that on a daily basis. But Whiteclay, a terrible place where our people were killed, abused, it's now closed. And I want to thank those two individuals for everything that they did. And the Lakota people miss both of them very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brewer. That was so moving for anybody that knew John, and even people that didn't know John, to understand what he did together with Mr. LaMere, and what the result has been. Melissa, I think that's it.
If I could just share one more comment, if that's okay. I mean, once again, I just wanted to express that I'm really grateful to be here today, and I really appreciated what you guys had to share. I live in San Francisco, and it makes me think that there's a portion of San Francisco where it's just accepted that it's very dangerous. There are different parts of San Francisco where it's just been accepted. I mean, there's a spot in particular called the Tenderloin where it's just infested with crime. And I also learned through my volunteer work, it's where many senior citizens live. And so it's a shame that it's this community that's crime riddled. It's just been plagued by social difficulties. And I'm really inspired by your presentation today to move forward and see how I can be an advocate for change, applying some of the lessons you've shared here today.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you all that have joined us. And Elizabeth, I just, have a tremendous amount of gratitude for just connecting with you and being able to share this.
Anything else, Melissa?
I don't believe so. Go ahead and close this out unless we had any more questions. Alrighty.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for coming. And they did say that there will be a recording of this session will be uploaded onto YouTube. You're welcome to either email the organizers or either myself or Dr. Overman about a recording. They said it would be a couple days before it will be available. Well, at this time, we would like to thank our Indigenous scholars and leaders for your teachings and for your presentation of this impactful and critical work. That concludes this presentation. We would like to thank the University of San Francisco, the National Academy of Public Administration, the organizers of the Social Equity Leadership Conference, and we would like to extend our gratitude to the Indigenous scholars and leaders for this presentation. We hope you have a wonderful remainder of the conference. Mado, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.